Now, there's a long list of female characters who originate from the DCAU. Harley Quinn, Livewire, Roxy Rocket, Renee Montoya, Phantasm, Baby Doll, Red Claw, and the one that we're going to talk about today is Ink. Now, yes, there are male characters too who originate from the DCAU who bled back into comics, Devil Ray, Downpour, and Lockup. But the reason why there's so many DCAU created female characters is because a lot of female characters at the time in DC Comics were either A, dead like Supergirl, or B, stuck in love interest roles like Lois Lane. The DCAU even updated other female characters, which also stuck with those characters. For example, Poison Ivy, Hawkgirl, and Stargirl are all the characters they are today because of the DCAU. They also created characters who didn't actually make it into comics, unfortunately, but they were intended to be as popular as characters like Baby Doll and Harley Quinn and Livewire. That being Volcana and Tazurki. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name. It's been a while since I watched the episode she appeared in. But she's the Katana lookalike-ish type character, who is technically based off Katana, but not Katana. Now, the character we're going to be talking about today, like I said, is Ink, a villain who originated from my personal favorite DCA show, Batman Beyond, appearing in the third episode of the first season. Ink is an unknown woman who is the result of a human experimentation. And while the character might not exactly have the most original backstory, her power set is definitely unique, but still having comparisons to that of Clayface, without being a copy. Ink is a slippery shapeshifter who, you guessed it, is like Ink. The character's liquid form typically is when she's at her strongest, but also having somewhat of a human form with what one might consider Ink-like skin, with it being either purple or blue, or purplish blue. However, she does have two weaknesses, that being the cold and the other being water, and she would appear throughout the series as a recurring villain. In Season 1, Episode 11, she'd return after being broken out from prison by a man who's obsessed with her, who, while of course believes that he's in love with her and she loves him, she is in all purposes using him, which he himself actually kind of subconsciously thinks and feels like. 10 on 10 episode. We even get a reference to the Return of Dark Knight comics with a clunky robot Batman suit. She then appears in Season 3, Episode 3, and is revealed to actually have a daughter named Diana Clay. And long revelations that she might not have always been as much of a villain as she is now. With the episode ending with it actually being theorized she might have died, however, we most likely know that she didn't, or at least she didn't die forever, due to the fact that the character does return afterwards, meaning she most likely did survive. However, we don't actually know if she did survive or if she was resurrected, which also could possibly be a possibility. Due to the nature of her powers, it is possible she could just never died or could have just been brought back to life. And we got the confirmation that she is very much alive once again in Season 3, Episode 8, where she's the opening villain of the episode where the Justice League appear. And she showed up again later on in a 15-year time jump in the episode Epilogue from Justice League Unlimited, which is not a Batman Beyond episode, but is kind of treated as one a lot of time during continuity. Here, she's ever so briefly taking out Shriek, Stalker, and a future Parasite, and are fighting the Justice League. And then she'll be brought to mainstream comics, well, mainstream-ish. That being, she's not a character from Earth 1 or Earth 0 or even Earth Prime, but from Earth 12, a continuity that is heavily based off of the DCAU, to the point that many believe it is the DCAU. However, numerous writers and other fans who are not necessarily writers, but I do definitely trust, have pointed out multiple plot holes. Bruce Timm himself has also said that Earth 12 is not the DCAU. And Bruce Timm is the one who made the DCAU, so I'm just going to take his word for that. So, therefore, I'm not considering it the DCAU. So, she debuted in Batman Beyond issue 8 from 2011 in mainstream comics. As she did already appear in tie-in comics of the same title, but from an earlier year. That which was actually the DCAU, this is mainstream comics. It's confusing, like really confusing. Batman Beyond is a very confusing mythology to keep track of, due to the fact that there's multiple reboots, multiple unexplained events, and multiple things that aren't exactly, flowing the way you wish they would. But it is still amazing in my opinion. Like I said, Batman Beyond is amazing, but it's sometimes really hard to keep track of. And while she was intended to be given a bigger role eventually, with her origin being explored, due to this being 2011 though, it was time for the New 52, meaning that the book was canceled, and therefore we never actually got any real revelation on the Ink stuff. Instead, it would be brought back in a digital Batman Beyond comic from the New 52, which Ink would also appear in, but in a far more or less intense role, where the character is back to basics. But while there's plenty of plot holes between multiple characters from the DCAU and Earth 12, from what we know, Ink does seem to have a very similar history to that on the show, with minor tweaks. For example, her morality seems to be slightly tweaked, with now being slightly more brutal. However, that could have just been because of the show's censorship due to the fact that it was pointed at younger audiences. Also, during her comic book history, it was implied that she might have had a history at one point with the Royal Flush Gang, either that be good or bad. However, this might not be a retcon considering the fact we have no clue what Ink did before the experiment, except for the fact that she had a daughter. So I wouldn't say that this really disproves Ink's history isn't still the same, as experiments and that her daughter are still both canon in comics. However, Ink would meet her end during Tim Drake's time as Batman Beyond, where she would tackle the new Batman Beyond, that being in Batman Beyond issue 6 from 2016. And she'd actually die a hero-ish, as she does die and sacrifice herself in order to save her daughter, and Batman himself, although that's more or less a bonus, which I thought was very fitting for the character's end. However, I would perhaps explore this more with having her be alive. She dies right after seeing her perhaps gain some sort of morality. Well, she already had it, but it's clear here that she more or less has more of it now, which in my opinion is very interesting. However, we never really got any closure on that. She has recently returned, but not really, kinda. It's really confusing, like I explained. So Ink herself is alive once again, or never died. It's still really confusing. But we do know that she is around at least, which gives hopes that maybe Ink could be explored more. Because I think the character is really cool, has a cool look, and the idea that she has a history before the experiments is, in my opinion, really interesting. And I like that they went to the daughter angle, because it makes the character come across more human, despite the fact that she, in a weird way, isn't human anymore. She'd also be a playable character in the Batman Beyond DLC for LEGO Batman 3, with her, Blight, Mr. Freeze being the only villains from the show be included. The reason I point this out, also, I say the show because Joker and Blanc were included, but they weren't on the show, they were in the movie. So the reason I point this out is, while I was doing research, I found there was a lot of complaints that Shriek and Spellbinder were absent while Ink was there. So apparently people were upset that Ink appeared, but not Spellbinder or Shriek. Personally, if I had to pick, I'd choose Ink 100%. No offense to Spellbinder, who I love, but I don't see how his powers would really be playable in a LEGO game, while Ink's, I think, are much easier to adapt. Ink is, in my opinion, a great villain, but along with all Batman Beyond canon, is a little confusing from what stays canon between the show, or 12 comics, or other DCAU shows in tie-in comics. For example, Tim Drake is seemingly a lot younger in the comics, along with Batwoman Beyond, who seems to be inspired by someone who isn't one of the 3 Batwomen from the DCAU, or how Hush, Red Hood, and Cyborg all exist in the comics, yet don't in the DCAU, or how Lex Luthor and Darkseid should be dead or at least missing, yet Lex Luthor is an AI god, and Darkseid is now blind after going to the Source Wall of Highfather, the latter of which had died. But at the end of the day, Batman Beyond is a great show, great comic, well, comics, technically, just great everything. However, I didn't really like when Tim took over as for Terry. I did not like when Terry, quote-unquote, died. He did come back, because he didn't actually die. He faked his death. But I didn't like when they killed off Terry, because I actually thought he was going to be actually dead. And that made me really worried, because I really like Terry. Anyways, what do you think about Ink? Personally, like I said, I think she's a great villain, and I hope she returns in a form that is more than a cameo, because she kind of is labeled as a cameo Batman Beyond villain at this point. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.